Good morning, guys. It's Monday the 11th. This is the first day of the third to last week. So we have this week and next week where you guys will have assignments posted. And then your final week, I will not be posting any major assignments. I might have some kind of small enrichment thing for you guys, but that's basically your week to turn stuff in for those of you who want to raise your grades to A's and B's. All right. Let's go ahead and truck passing by. Let's go ahead and get into it. So in your coronavirus news, I got two things for you. The first is just kind of an overall coverage of where we stand. We are now 2 days shy of 2 months into the full ordered national shutdown quarantine. So coronavirus updates. There has been a small explosion of people testing positive with coronavirus in the White House, which is, no matter how you slice it, not particularly good. And the most recent news is that the vice president, despite the fact that people who work closely with him within like coughing and touching distance, the vice president will not be self-isolating. So we'll see if that turns out to be a good decision or not. Excuse me. Unemployment is now likely to top over 20%, and they are saying that May and June may still have higher unemployment rates. And the U.S. death toll is going to be, it says here, near 80,000. Keep in mind, this was late last night, so as of today, it is very likely that we will report over 80,000 deaths. There's also been a new rash of children getting sick, including several deaths in New York, in that they are contracting a disease as a Kawasaki disease. That's named, I'm going to guess, a Japanese scientist was the one who discovered it. Kids are getting it in relation to COVID infections. Now, whether it's COVID-19, the more widespread one, or if it's the SARS-CoV-2 disease that we're finding that's more virulent and is coming through the East Coast, that'll have to wait to be seen. Now, the first part of that, the explosion of illnesses in the White House, is notable because this is going on while the White House is still promoting federal openings and promoting that the country should be going back to regular work, should be going back to normal operating procedures, when of course the White House itself is now in danger of being shut down, especially because you have to remember that pretty much everybody who works in government is very, very old. It's mostly a bunch of old white guys. If you don't believe me, just, Google a picture of the current White House administration or the current Senate, and you're going to notice it's mostly old white guys who are quite literally the people most vulnerable to COVID-19 related illnesses. So, as you can imagine, this doesn't really look good. All right. For my sophomores, here's a history thing for you. I've mentioned this a couple times. We just barely covered it in school before we had to shut down and all that. But the 1918 flu pandemic that happened coinciding with the last year of World War I. So, notably in the United States and in other countries, there were quarantines and lockdowns. The Spanish flu killed way more people than COVID-19 has so far. Now, that's probably because, one, it was more deadly, but it's also definitely because 100 years ago, our medical capacities were far less technologically sound than they are now. We simply have better medicine. What this article talks about, though, is how people, just like today, couldn't take it anymore, and they started breaking quarantine. They started running around, basically saying this infringes on our economic rights, our civil liberties, our religious freedom, literally the same conversations we're hearing today. And of course, as a result, there were massive reinsurgences of Spanish flu, and it killed more people. So, because of the problems going on here, the quote, burdensome requirements, we can expect to see this exact same thing happening, where we have armed protesters angry because they're being told they have to stay home. It's understandable, but it's also necessary, and in quite likelihood, we're going to see the exact same things happen that we did 100 years ago. Alright, for seniors. Now, this one's more government than econ, but it's something that we didn't really talk about just because of the speed at which we have to go through so much. So, Indian tribes, Native American tribes in the United States. We never really got a chance to talk about them in the government semester, but here's how they work. They are sovereign nations, meaning that even though they're located in the United States, they technically operate as their own independent nations. So in South Dakota, there's a brewing fight going on where we have the governor threatening to take tribes to court over checkpoints they've established. So here's the basic facts. I do think you should read the article, though, because it'll give you an idea of like the kinds of complications going on here. So the Indian nations have set up checkpoints on all the freeways in and out of their territory in South Dakota, because there's two tribes there. They're two different Sioux tribes. Now, here's the big thing is the checkpoints, the South Dakota governor says is both illegal and disruptive to the state's traffic and economy. Now, that second part is true. The first one is very questionable. It's actually an interesting legal argument. So legal studies students, you especially should be paying attention to this as it develops, because highways are under government control. If it's a freeway interstate that goes from one state to another, the federal government has jurisdiction. If it's a state highway, then it is under the control of the state government, which means the governor. However, these checkpoints all exist on Indian land, meaning these state highways or interstates are going through sovereign nations. And if it's a sovereign nation, it means the tribes have jurisdiction. So it's kind of this weird legal limbo situation going on where it could very likely go to court, and it would be a very challenging question because both sides have a legitimate argument. Highways are state domain, but it's sovereign territory. So there could be this real question. Now, as far as why the Native American tribes are doing this, well, this actually has a historical bend to it because traditionally their poor treatment by the American government means that they simply do not have the infrastructure, like many rural areas, to handle a full-on outbreak. So they are taking extreme measures. So keep an eye on that one. All right, last thing, guys, my daily entertainment to keep away the boredom. Now, this is a tabletop game, and it's a really good one because it's really easy. You'll notice where my cursor is here, the weight on the complexity rating, that refers to how difficult a game is to learn. So this at a 1.8 out of 5 is a very easy game. You know, most people say you can teach it to an 8-year-old. So it's a pretty easy one. It's called Splendor. You can actually find digital copies. I have a copy of it on my Kindle tablet. You can get a phone edition. So this one's a really good one to play either with people or against the computer. It's really simple. And essentially it's a resource collecting game where you're essentially trying to collect resources. Player with the most points at the end wins. So real simple one, real easy mechanics to learn, and you can get it digitally or if you get a tabletop board game copy, it's pretty cheap. I think it's like $25. Alright guys, that's it for me today. Remember, stuff is getting posted on Thursdays and Fridays now, and I will see you next week.